He's the ghost in the machine, the man who runs the city from the shadows. You don't look him in the eye, and you certainly don't try to save him. But on a rainy Tuesday in November, Coraline Jones, a 24-year-old waitress drowning in debt, did the unthinkable. When a silenced pistol cleared leather in a crowded restaurant, she didn't run, she didn't hide. She screamed, "Get down!" and threw her body in front of a bullet meant for the Mafia king. Why save a monster? The answer isn't bravery. It's a secret that would cost them both everything. This isn't a fairy tale. This is how the waitress became the queen. The rain on 54th Street wasn't washing the city clean. It was just making the grime slicker. Inside the Gilded Olive, the air smelled of garlic, expensive cologne, and damp wool. It was an old-school joint, the kind with red velvet booths that had absorbed secrets since the 1970s, and waiters who knew when to pour wine and when to disappear into the kitchen. Coraline Jones adjusted her apron, wincing as the knot dug into her lower back. She was 6 hours into a double shift, and her feet felt like they were encased in cement. "Table 4 needs more bread, Coraline. Stop daydreaming," snapped Marco, the floor manager. He was a small man with a Napoleonic complex and a hairline that was retreating faster than his patience. "On it, Marco," Coraline said, her voice flat. She grabbed a basket of focaccia, her mind drifting to the eviction notice sitting on her kitchen counter in Queens. 3 months behind on rent. Her brother, Danny, had promised to help, but Danny had disappeared 2 weeks ago, leaving only a cryptic text message. "I'm going to fix everything, sis. Just wait." She moved through the dining room, navigating the labyrinth of tables. It was a Tuesday, usually a slow night, but the energy in the room shifted abruptly at 8:15 p.m. The chatter died down, replaced by the clinking of silverware and hushed whispers. The heavy oak doors at the front swung open. Stefano Moretti walked in. You didn't need to know who he was to know he was important. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Coraline made in a year. He was tall, with dark hair swept back and eyes the color of a stormy sea, cold, calculating, and utterly indifferent to the stares he attracted. He was flanked by 2 men who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast. One was Luca, his longtime enforcer, a man whose neck was wider than his head. The restaurant fell into a terrified reverence. This was Stefano's territory. "Table 8 is reserved for Mr. Moretti," Marco hissed, shoving Coraline toward the back. "Take the wine list over. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, don't spill anything." "Son." Coraline swallowed hard. She grabbed the leather-bound wine list and approached the corner booth. Stefano sat with his back to the wall. Standard procedure for men with enemies. He was already scanning the room, his gaze dissecting every patron, every waiter, every shadow. When Coraline reached the table, the air felt colder. "Good evening," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She placed the menus down. "Can I start you gentlemen off with San Pellegrino?" Stefano said, not looking at her. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but edged with steel, and a bottle of the 98 Barolo. "Open it at the table." "Yes, sir." Coraline retreated to the bar, her heart hammering. She retrieved the wine, her hands shaking as she pulled the cork. When she returned to the table, Stefano was in deep conversation with Luca. The shipment from Jersey was light, Luca was murmuring. "Someone is skimming, boss. We'll handle it tonight," Stefano replied, his tone devoid of emotion. "If Ricci is skimming, Ricci disappears." Coraline poured a splash of wine into Stefano's glass for him to taste. He paused, finally looking up at her. For a second, their eyes met. Coraline felt a jolt, like touching a live wire. He didn't look like a monster. He looked exhausted. There were lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. "It's good," he said, dismissing her with a nod. Coraline stepped back, intending to fade into the woodwork. She moved towards the kitchen, scanning the room out of habit, a habit she'd picked up growing up in a house where you had to watch the door to know what kind of mood your father was in. That's when she saw him. A man in a hooded grey sweatshirt was sitting at a small table near the entrance. He had been nursing a coffee for an hour. He hadn't ordered food. He kept his head down. But as Coraline walked past, he looked up. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The eyes under the hood were bloodshot and desperate, but she knew them. She knew the scar above the left eyebrow from a bicycle accident when they were 12. Danny. Her brother wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in rehab, or working the construction job he lied about having. Danny's hand moved inside his sweatshirt. He stood up. His gaze wasn't on Coraline, it was locked on the corner booth, on Stefano Moretti. Time dilated. Coraline saw the metallic glint of the pistol as Danny drew it from his waistband. She saw Luca, Stefano's bodyguard, distracted by his phone. She saw Stefano raising the glass of wine to his lips, completely unaware that death was standing 20 feet away. If she screamed, "Danny, no!" the bodyguards would kill her brother before he pulled the trigger. If she did nothing, her brother would become a murderer, and the most powerful man in New York would die. She didn't think. Instinct, primal and electric, took over. "Get down!" Coraline screamed the words, her voice tearing through the hushed restaurant. She didn't run toward her brother. She ran toward the target. Danny fired. Pop, pop. The sound was deceptively small, like firecrackers, but the impact was catastrophic. Coraline threw herself across the booth, shoving Stefano hard against the red velvet upholstery. She felt a sledgehammer slam into her right shoulder, spinning her around. The force knocked the wind out of her. Glass shattered. Screams erupted. She collapsed onto the cold tile floor, the smell of expensive wine mixing with the coppery tang of blood. Above her, chaos broke loose. She heard Luca roaring orders. She heard more shots. Louder, distinct cracks of return fire. "Secure the exit. Get the car." Then, there were hands on her. Strong, calloused hands. "Look at me." She blinked, her vision blurring at the edges. Stefano Moretti was hovering over her. His impeccable suit was stained with crimson. Her crimson. His face, previously a mask of indifference, was contorted with shock and something else. Rage? Confusion? "You hit!" he barked. "My brother!" she wheezed, the pain radiating down her arm like liquid fire. Don't kill him." "Stay with me," Stefano commanded, ignoring her plea. He pressed a cloth napkin hard against her shoulder. The pain was blinding. "Why did you do that? Who are you?" "Coraline," she whispered. The lights of the chandelier above began to spin. "I'm just the waitress." Blackness swallowed her whole. The first thing Coraline noticed was the silence. Hospitals were usually noisy. Beeping monitors, squeaking shoes, the PA system. But this room was quiet, save for the rhythmic whoosh click of a high-end ventilation system. She opened her eyes. This wasn't a hospital room, or at least not a normal one. The walls were painted a soothing cream color. There was artwork on the walls, real oil paintings, not generic prints. A large window looked out over the Manhattan skyline, the city twinkling in the twilight. She tried to sit up, but a sharp tug in her shoulder made her gasp. "Easy," a voice said from the corner. Coraline froze. Stefano Moretti was sitting in a leather armchair near the window. He wasn't wearing the suit jacket anymore. His white dress shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and ink. He was reading a file, a thick manila folder. "Where am I?" Coraline croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "Mount Sinai, private wing," Stefano said, closing the folder. He stood up and walked towards the bed. He moved with a predator's grace, silent and deliberate. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. The bullet passed through your deltoid, shattered the clavicle, missed the subclavian artery by 2 millimeters. You're lucky." "Lucky," she repeated, the irony bitter on her tongue. Did you catch the shooter?" Stefano's expression hardened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He got away. My men were too busy trying to keep me alive and figure out why a waitress decided to play Secret Service. Relief washed over Coraline, followed instantly by guilt. Danny was alive, but he was on the run from the Moretti family. That was a fate worse than prison. Stefano pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his eyes bored into hers. Now let's talk about the truth, Coraline Jones. He tapped the folder on his lap. I have your whole life in here. Born in Queens. Father was a drunk, died in 05. Mother passed 2 years ago. You work double shifts at the Gilded Olive and a diner in Brooklyn. You're $60,000 in debt, mostly medical bills from your mother's cancer treatments. Coraline felt naked, exposed. Is it a crime to be poor, Mr. Moretti? No, he said softly. But it is suspicious. A woman with nothing to lose saves a man she doesn't know. Why, I told you I reacted. Bullshit, Stefano said. He didn't raise his voice, which made it scarier. You shouted, "Get down," before the gun was even fully raised. You saw him. You knew he was going to shoot. He paused, his eyes narrowing. Or maybe you were part of it. A setup? You take a graze, become the hero, and infiltrate my life. A graze, Coraline snapped, gesturing to a bandaged shoulder with her good arm. He nearly blew my arm off. You think I planned that? People have done crazier things to get to me. I saw his face, Coraline lied, her heart pounding. He looked nervous. I knew. Stefano studied her for a long, agonizing minute. He was a human lie detector, a man who built an empire on reading weakness. Coraline held his gaze, terrified that he would see Danny's face in her own features. They had the same chin, the same nose. Finally, Stefano leaned back. My doctors tell me you need extensive physical therapy. You can't work. You can't pay your rent. I'll figure it out, she said defiantly. You won't, Stefano countered, because as of this morning, you are a target. Coraline went cold. What? The press got hold of it. The Angel of the Olive, they're calling you. If my enemies think you matter to me, they will come for you to get to me. If they think you saw the shooter's face, they will come to silence you. He stood up, buttoning his cuffs. You can't go back to your apartment, Coraline. It's not safe. So what do I do? Tears pricked her eyes. She was trapped. I owe you a life debt, Stefano said formally. In his world, that meant everything. Until the shooter is caught and the threat is neutralized, you are under my protection. You're coming to my estate. I don't want your protection, Coraline argued, though she knew she had no leverage. I just want to go home. Stefano walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the handle. He looked back at her, and for a brief moment, the hardness in his eyes softened. You saved the devil, Coraline, he said quietly. Now you have to live in hell with him. 2 days later, the estate. The drive to Long Island was silent. Coraline sat in the back of an armored SUV, her arm in a sling. Stefano sat next to her, typing on a BlackBerry, ignoring her presence. The Moretti estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion, high stone walls, iron gates, and men with earpieces patrolling the perimeter. As the car pulled up the long gravel driveway, Coraline felt a sense of dread. She was walking into the lion's den, and she was hiding the fact that the lion's prey was her own brother. The car stopped. Luca opened the door. Welcome home, Miss Jones, Luca grunted. He didn't look happy about having a civilian in the house. Stefano stepped out and offered Coraline his hand to help her down. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm, firm. My house rules are simple, Stefano said as they walked up the grand staircase. You don't go into the West Wing. That's business. You don't leave the grounds without Luca. And you don't lie to me. He stopped at the top of the stairs and looked down at her. If I find out you're hiding something, Coraline, not even the fact that you saved my life will help you. Coraline nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Understood. He led her to a guest room that was bigger than her entire apartment. It had a 4-poster bed, a fireplace, and a balcony overlooking the gardens. "Rest," he said. "Dinner is at 8. Dress formally." "I don't have any clothes," she pointed out. "Check the closet." Stefano turned and left, closing the door with a solid click. Coraline walked to the closet and pulled it open. It was filled. Rows of silk dresses, cashmere sweaters, tailored trousers, everything in her size. She pulled out a black silk dress, her fingers trembling. He had done this in 2 days. The power he wielded was terrifying. She walked to the window and looked out at the sprawling grounds. Somewhere out there, Danny was running, and she was trapped in a golden cage with the man who wanted to kill him. She pulled her cell phone from her pocket, the one thing she had refused to give up. She checked her messages. Nothing. She typed a quick text to the number she hoped Danny was still using. "I'm safe, but he's hunting you. Get out of the city. Do not contact me." She hit send, then immediately deleted the message. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Jones?" It was a maid. "Mr. Moretti sent this up for you." The maid entered and placed a small velvet box on the bedside table. Coraline approached it slowly. She opened the lid. Inside was a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a pendant shaped like a guardian angel. There was a note. "For the Angel of the Olive. Thank you. S." Coraline stared at the jewelry. He was charming her, or perhaps he was genuinely grateful. It made everything worse. If he was a monster, she could hate him. But if he was a man capable of gratitude, how was she going to betray him to save her brother? Downstairs in his study, Stefano Moretti poured himself a scotch. He watched the security feed on his monitor. He watched Coraline standing in her room, holding the necklace. "Boss," Luca said, stepping out of the shadows, "we ran facial rec on the blurry CCTV footage from the restaurant." Stefano took a sip of the amber liquid. "And? No matches in the police database for a shooter profile, but..." Luca hesitated. "We ran a familial match against the staff, just in case." Stefano turned his chair around. "Tell me." "The shooter," Luca said, placing a photo on the desk. "He shares 40% of his facial markers with Coraline Jones." Stefano looked at the photo of the shooter, then at the live feed of the woman upstairs holding his gift. The glass in his hand cracked. "Her brother," Stefano whispered, his voice turning into a growl. "She didn't save me. She saved him." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. The gratitude was gone. The coldness returned, darker than before. "Keep her comfortable, Luca," Stefano said, walking towards the door. "Let her think she's safe. Let her think she's fooling me. And when her brother reaches out, we'll be listening." For 2 weeks, the Moretti estate became Coraline's entire world. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and suffocating. Her shoulder was healing. The physical therapy sessions were grueling, overseen by a silent doctor on Stefano's payroll. But the real torture wasn't the physical pain. It was the man who owned the house. Stefano was playing a game, though Coraline didn't know the rules. He didn't lock her in her room. He didn't interrogate her under a swinging light bulb. Instead, he did something far more dangerous. He charmed her. Every evening, he insisted she join him for dinner. They sat at a long mahogany table, candles flickering between them, while silent staff served food that cost more than Coraline's rent. "Tell me about your childhood, Coraline," Stefano asked one Tuesday night, swirling a glass of Pinot Noir. He watched her over the rim of the glass. "Did you always have that protective instinct, the one that made you jump in front of a gun?" Coraline's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Every question felt like a landmine. "I raised my brother," she said, sticking to the sliver of truth. "Our dad was difficult. I learned to step in between them." "Your brother," Stefano repeated. He set the glass down. "Danny, right? You haven't mentioned him much. Does he know you're here?" "No," Coraline lied, her heart thumping against her ribs. We aren't close anymore. He's traveling." Stefano nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. A shame. Family is everything. A man who abandons his sister doesn't deserve protection. He stood up and walked around the table. Coraline stiffened. He stopped behind her chair, his hand resting lightly on her uninjured shoulder. The heat of his palm seeped through the silk of her blouse. "I have a surprise for you," he murmured near her ear. He led her to the library, a massive room filled with leather-bound books and the scent of old paper. In the center of the room sat a grand piano. "My mother taught me to play," Stefano said, sitting on the bench. "It's the only time the noise in my head stops." He began to play. It was Debussy, Clair de Lune. The melody was haunting, melancholic, and tender. Coraline watched his hands. They were large, scarred hands, hands that she knew had ended lives, moving with impossible grace over the ivory keys. She found herself drawn to him. It was a terrifying realization. He was a criminal, a monster who ran the city's underworld. But in this light, with the music filling the room, he looked like a lonely king on a throne of knives. When the song ended, he looked up at her. The harshness in his eyes was gone, replaced by an intensity that made her knees weak. "Coraline," he said softly, "you saved my life. I haven't forgotten that. Whatever debt you are in, whatever troubles you have outside these walls, let me fix them. Tell me what you need. I need you to let my brother go. When you find him," she wanted to scream. "I need you to not kill me when you find out I'm a liar." Instead, she stepped closer. "Why are you being so kind to me, Stefano? I'm just a waitress." He stood up, towering over her. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. "Because in a world of wolves, you're the first innocent thing I've seen in a long time," he lied smoothly. "And I find that I want to keep you." Coraline's breath hitched. For a moment, the lie felt real. She leaned into his touch, starving for comfort, starving for safety. Buzz. The moment shattered. Stefano's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face instantly hardening into the mask of the Don. "Go to bed, Coraline," he said, his voice cold again. "I have work to do." Coraline fled the room, her heart conflicted. She was falling for him, and she didn't know that as soon as the door clicked shut, Stefano answered the phone. "Talk to me, Luca. We found a trace on the brother," Luca's voice crackled. "He's in the Bronx, hiding out in a squat on 148th Street. We can grab him tonight." Stefano looked at the piano keys, remembering the way Coraline had looked at him. With hope. "No," Stefano said. "Not yet. If we grab him now, she'll hate me. I need her to choose me first. I need her to give him up voluntarily." "Boss, that's risky. The kid tried to kill you." "The kid is an amateur. He's a pawn," Stefano growled. "I want to know who put the pawn on the board. Someone hired him, and I'm going to use Coraline to find out who." "How?" "Tomorrow is the Red Cross gala," Stefano said, a cruel smile touching his lips. "I'm taking her with me. We're going to flush the rats out into the open." The dress arrived in a box the size of a coffin. It was blood-red satin, strapless, with a slit that ran up to the thigh. "Wear it," the note from Stefano read. "Tonight, you are the Queen of New York." Coraline stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror. The bruise on her shoulder was fading, hidden by a clever wrap. She looked transformed. The tired waitress with the aching feet was gone. In her place was a woman who looked like she belonged in Stefano Moretti's world, but her hands were shaking. Earlier that afternoon, while the maids were cleaning, Coraline had managed to steal a moment with the gardener's phone. She had sent one desperate text to Danny. "Stop running. Turn yourself in to the police. It's the only way you survive." Danny's reply had been chilling. "I can't. I owe money to the Irish mob. They said if I don't kill Moretti, they kill me. I'm coming for him tonight." Coraline felt sick. Danny was going to try again. Tonight. At the gala. A knock at the door. Stefano entered. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He stopped when he saw her, and for a split second, the act dropped. He actually looked stunned. "Bellissima," he whispered. "Beautiful." He offered his arm. "Are you ready to meet the city?" "Do I have a choice?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "No." The drive to the Pierre Hotel was a blur of police